What's up boys, today is going to be a fun one. We're doing a tier list for all of the veteran sharpshooters weapons. Now this will be from a higher level gameplay perspective. I'm thinking heresy and damnation in mind when discussing these. This is by no means an indication on how fun a weapon is to use, so please don't get angry at me if I don't rate your favorite weapon as high as you think it should be. And yes, I am looking at you plasma gun users. With that said, if you enjoy the video, give it a like, subscribe for more content like this, and you can check out my Twitch down in the description below. Now let's jump straight into the meat and potatoes of the video, starting with the Atrox Tactical Axe family. The difference between these three axes are that the higher the mark is, the higher the base stats. However, other than that, they are all identical, so we'll just put one on the list for the sake of tidiness. And I'm going to stick the axes in at A. Reason being that as a sharpshooter, mobility and being able to get out of bad situations and getting our gun out is paramount. So a weapon like this that gives us incredible dodge distance and a high dodge cap is invaluable. They're also particularly good at taking out individual units, as well as penetrating armor. The next weapon is the standard issue Minotaur Sapper Shovel. Now this is actually a really versatile weapon, much for the same reasons. Has very good mobility, high dodge cap, high dodge distance, good push attack as well as just being very good at handling multiple enemies at once. If you've not tried this low-key weapon already, then I recommend that you do. Coming up next is the Cadia Mark IV Assault Chainsword. Now, unfortunately, I don't think this is as good as people want it to be, so I'm going to put it in C, middle of the road. Reason being is that though it's a very fast weapon to use and in most situations quite versatile, the push attack is extremely underwhelming, and the special attack that allows you to rev it up and chainsword through someone leaves you very vulnerable for a split second while doing that animation, so you don't often get to do it in higher difficulties. Now the Catachan Mark III Combat Blade, excellent weapon. Extremely mobile, almost S tier because of the mobility alone. If you have it with the Blessing Lacerate that allows you to apply bleed to enemies, this is a crusher killer. It can even go through bulwark shields as well and bleed them up. All round, one of the best weapons in the game for every class. And following that, we have the Accatran Recon Lasgun family, starting with the Mark II. This is an F. I'm sorry guys, this gun may have like 0 recoil, but it's coupled with 0 damage. The same goes for the Mark 7A. This is a slower firing, higher damage variant, but again, it just doesn't do anything on the higher difficulties. It really is just more of a tickle gun at that point. I will give the Mark 6D some credit. When you have this with increased crit and also the Infernus ability, and this one's higher rate of fire, it almost turns into a long range flamethrower, but a single target one. Could have some interesting use cases, but right now, all three of these guns are just borderline unusable in any difficulty higher than Malice. And following those, we have the Headhunter Autogun family, starting with the Agrippina Mark 8 and the Mark 3. Both of these are burst fire weapons. They're just not nice to use. High recoil, damage is underwhelming, and just a terrible iron sight. However, I will give credit where credit's due. And the Vraks Mark 7 Headhunter Autogun, a single fire marksman-like rifle style gun, is actually quite usable. It's again subject to the same downfalls, whereas the iron sight is terrible. Also, all of them have pretty bad ammo efficiency and the damage is underwhelming, but I consider this one far more usable. Moving on swiftly, we have the Kantrael Infantry Lasgun family, starting with the 4. Now, first of all of the Lasguns in this family have a red dot sight, which makes them unique in that aspect that they're incredibly easy to use. But this one is going to go in C because of the incredibly low damage output of this weapon. When you start getting into heresy and damnation, you'll find that even a scab gunner takes like 3 or 4 headshots, which just makes this not a good choice for that mode. And then moving on up, we have the 1A variant, which does a lot more damage, has slightly less rate of fire, but all of the other positives from the family, so we're going to pop that one in B. And then the Mark 12 is the slowest firing, however the highest damage version of this gun, and this is an easy S tier weapon. Why? Because even on damnation, if you have one of these with a high damage roll, you can one-shot most specials and elites as well as all gunners with the high accuracy, high ammo efficiency, and incredible versatility of this weapon. Now we're looking at the Catachan Devilclaw Sword family with the Mark 1, Mark 4, and Mark 7. These swords are more or less the exact same thing, with only their heavy attack patterns differing a little bit. I think the Mark 4 as well has a 4 combo attack pattern on its light attacks. However, it's more or less exactly the same thing as the other two. As the mark goes up, as with any weapons like this, the damage and base stats increase ever so slightly. With that said, I'm just going to put one on the board to save some space and keep it tidy. And this is easily another A tier melee weapon. Incredibly versatile, extremely good mobility, and if you can get one of these with devastating strikes and savage sweep, you have yourself what could quite possibly be an S tier weapon easily. However, because it's dependent on those two blessings, we're going to keep it in A for now. Now we're moving on to a weapon I know I'm going to catch heat for where I place it. The Power Sword has undeniably some of the best offensive ability out of any melee weapon in the game. However, it suffers from some significant drawbacks in the defense department, and for that reason, I'm only going to be putting it in B. Now, for those of you who are wondering what I'm on about, the Power Sword has one of the worst stamina efficiencies when it comes to sprinting and blocking, the lowest dodge cap out of the melee weapons available, and it's just generally quite clunky to use as you're required to energize it every time you swing. When crap is really hitting the fan on the higher difficulties, you need a weapon that allows you to reposition quickly and get your gun out again as fast as possible. You should not really ever be dealing with hordes as much as you would be in the lower difficulties. So if you're trying to push higher and you want the more consistent survivability, you want to avoid the Power Sword. Now moving on to the Lucius pattern Helbore Lasguns, we have the Mark 1, 2 and 3. The Mark 1s and 2 are going to be going into E tier. The reason being the combination of the bad iron sights, the poor ammo efficiency, the charging up of shots, as well as the low rate of fire that comes with that, make this weapon just have really poor overall DPS. However, I will give the Mark III a D as it does hit extremely hard and can actually pierce carapace armor as well, which is an interesting interaction that no other lasgun can boast. Next, we have the braced autogun family, starting with the Columnus Mark II and the Graia Mark IV braced autoguns. Now, these two are actually going to go right into C tier, being that they're extremely easy to handle, very quick to get out and aim, terrible at long range, but close to medium engagements they're fantastic at. They do pretty good damage across the board. However, these require a very aggressive gameplay style, so I'd almost want to reserve these for speed running, malice and lower. And the final gun in that family is the Accatran Mark 8 braced autogun. It's going to go in the same rating. It's just a bit slower, a little clunkier, higher damage, but more or less pulls off the same thing. Next up is the Combat Axe family. We're going to be starting with the Rashad Mark 2. Now this is just going to go straight into C. It's a decent all-round weapon, sits somewhere between a combat axe and a tactical axe, but doesn't really excel at either or. It's a good all-rounder. If you're familiar with the moveset and like it, then there's nothing wrong with picking this weapon. Second is the Atrox Mark 8 Combat Axe. Now, though it has less mobility and therefore is slightly harder to survive with, its increased damage and more suitable moveset for the brutal momentum blessing make this thing incredibly powerful in the attack department, so it's getting an easy B. And finally, the Antax Mark 5 Combat Axe. I think a lot of people are going to be shocked to see this bad boy is going into S tier, but only if it has brutal momentum. This axe does incredible work with brutal momentum, and despite its big and hefty looks, it's actually an incredibly mobile item as well, with one of the higher dodge caps and good dodge distance. The push cost and the sprint cost leaves a little to be desired. However, when you need a melee weapon to clear out what's in front of you to get your gun out again, this thing is an absolute beast, not to mention that it does incredibly well against armored targets as well. And then the final axe we have is the Chain Axe, and it's just going to have to go in F, I'm afraid. It's just far too slow and clunky for its mediocre damage, and of course it has that thing where sometimes it'll catch onto enemies and like chainsaw through them, which just leaves you vulnerable to attacks on the higher difficulties. More guns next, we have the Infantry Autogun family here. Starting with the Agrippina Mark 1 Infantry Autogun, this is the middle of the road version with the sort of medium rate of fire and damage. We're going to stick this in D. All of them are going to be in D, and this is because the ammo efficiency is not very good, the damage is again not that impressive, and the iron sights on these guns sucks absolute butt. So then we're going to stick in the Graia Mark 8, this is the slower firing high damage one, and then finally the Columnus Mark 5, which, you know, you could say is akin to a SMG. Next is the Sirona Mark 2A quick draw stop revolver. This is just going to go straight to C. Real quick on this one, has a bad iron sight, rate of fire is low, reload time is really long, and overall ammo capacity is super low. Yes, it does do a ton of damage and can pierce carapace armor. However, in the higher difficulties where you're dealing with 20, 30, 40 maybe gunners in one engagement, God knows what else coming and spawning and like destroying you as well, it just does not have enough ammo to keep up with that kind of intensity. Next, we have the Boltgun, and we are going to be putting it in B. Now, the Boltgun does a lot of things incredibly well. It's super fun to use, and it can melt pretty much every large enemy in the game, be it Ogrin or Monstrosity. But it has a lot of drawbacks that make it very inconsistent in the higher difficulties like Heresy and Damnation. Ammo efficiency is pretty bad. It doesn't have a lot to begin with, and the clip sizes are also really small with an incredibly long reload time. So this is exactly the same issue that I was just explaining with the revolver. When you get into those spicier fights where there's a large number of gunners plus everything else that is spawning in that you have to deal with, it is really easy for you to run out of ammo when using this gun. Then you have the issue with the stability. When you're in single fire mode, it takes a very long time for the recoil to settle, so it's not really possible to quickly take out a bunch of shooters in a desperate situation either, which is a huge drawback. And next, moving on to the combat shotgun, that's just going to go straight into F. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to have as much impact as you would like from a shotgun. I mean, hell, it barely even feels like a shotgun at all. It feels more like a rifle, and barely anyone really uses it. The Shredder pistol, that's an F. Need I say more? The heavy las pistol, that's just an insta F. I mean, I could talk about them, but they're just both really bad. And finally, we have the plasma gun. I'm going to catch some heat for this, pun intended. I'm going to be putting it in E. And before you type angry messages, let me explain why. First of all, the obvious reasons. It takes way too long to reload. Okay, you could hurt yourself with it when venting, and you can even blow yourself up, which would be fine if it was super powerful, but it's not as powerful as I want it to be. Yeah, it does do a lot of damage, but the actual projectile itself is very small and it doesn't do a huge amount of AoE. Coupled with the fact that you have to charge each shot to fall to get max damage as well, makes this just the most unwieldy, clunky gun in the game that doesn't quite have the huge payoff you'd really want to see from something like that. But that's it, and that's the whole list. I would love to hear what you would change on it and why. And if you did enjoy this type of video, let me know that I'm doing something right by giving it a like and subscribing to the channel. And if you would like to catch me live at some point, there's a Twitch in the description as well for you to check out. But until next time, I'm going to go play some more Darktide, and I'll see you later.